What's up guys, my name is Liam and today we're going to be taking a look at the Endgame Gear KB65HE. Yes, it is a Hall effect gaming keyboard. This thing feels incredibly premium out of the box, but is this going to be the perfect gaming keyboard for you? Let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that Endgame Gear did send this out to me, but everything you will be hearing in this video is going to be my own words and my own opinions. Inside the box, this does come included with a USB-C cable. It also did come with this yellow Endgame Gear key. I removed the escape and put it up there in the top left corner. And then it does come with an additional set of these feet. These are actually thicker than the stock ones that come up on here to tilt the keyboard up just a little bit more. This is a tray mounted keyboard, and when it comes to the tray, it is this one solid aluminum piece. Feels incredibly sturdy and heavy, the way that I like it to feel. Over here on the left side is where you can plug in the USB-C. For the feet design, you do have this one long strip that goes from side to side down here at the bottom. I really do like this a lot. It plants nice and firmly and gives you great stability. And then up here at the top is where you do have those interchangeable feet. And again, it does come with the flatter style feet on here out of the box, but it does give you the option to give you the taller ones that does tilt up the keyboard a bit more. I really do feel like they nailed down the build of this aluminum tray as it sits very narrow up here at the front. And I got it coming in at about, looks like about 16.6 millimeters in thickness right there. But again, doesn't sit too high or anything like that. So all around feels really comfortable to use, whether you're typing or gaming with it. This is using Ducky double shot PBT keycaps. For me personally, I do really prefer shine through keycaps, but all around these feel really spot on. Taking a look over here at the internals, underneath the keycaps, you have the switches inside of this aluminum style plate, pretty standard stuff. And then underneath that, you do have a silicone gasket accompanied by the PCB. And here is a close-up look of what that PCB looks like. And below that, one thing that they did do differently is where people usually use a type of foam or a pour-on base foam, they did opt for this silicone style gasket. It does give you a little bit more stability in the filling, so it does feel a little bit more firm. But all in all, I'm a fan of the overall design of this. I really do feel like it feels great. And then lastly, here's a look of the aluminum tray. This is an entire solid aluminum piece. And as you can see here, this is tray mounted. It does come included with the newest Gateron KS37B switches with pre-lubed stabilizers. And one of the first things I noticed when I first started using these is how stable that these switches actually feel. And that is because the build has this dual rail structure to give you enhanced stability and durability. The springs are lightly lubed and the stems have a self-lubricating palm material, but all around these switches do feel incredibly smooth and lightweight. As I was going back and forth and comparing this to my Wooting 60HE, I do have the Lecker 60 switches, the springs over here on the Endgame Gear keyboard, a little bit shorter and wider compared to the spring on these Lecker 60s. So let's go ahead and drop a sound test of what typing on the KB65HE sounds like. The software is incredibly straightforward and simple to use. It has this very basic layout. Over here on the first key setting tabs is where you can adjust the different types of keys if you want to change your normal keys. It does also have an option over here for the function keys. You have your multimedia keys. Here's where macro settings are. Here's the original keyboard keys. You also do have mouse functions. There's this default setting. This does also come with dynamic keystroke, which I was pretty impressed to see, but it doesn't give you the option to change the values of this 2mm 3.6 and on the release of the switch at 3.6 or the 2mm. And down here you do have the lighting buttons if you wish to use the shortcut keys to control the lighting on your keyboard as opposed to having to come into the software to do so. But this next tab does give you those options to control all of the lighting effects right here on this page. And then lastly, the advanced tab, which is the most important option when it comes to making any type of adjustments over here on the keyboard. So just at default, as you can see here, if I were to touch the slider, it will automatically select all the keys for you. And they actually have this in increments of 1 and it goes all the way down to 40. And in all actuality, what this is this is a 0.1 millimeter, 0.2 millimeter. And then once you get to the 10, that is 1 millimeter, going all the way down to 4, which is 4 millimeters. So it does allow you to make adjustments on your key from 0.1 millimeter all the way down to 4 millimeters. And that is also the exact same thing over here on the release threshold of the Switch. And a couple things I did want to mention here really quick about these settings is this truly is one of the most sensitive keyboards that I've ever used. I myself, when I was using my Wooting keyboard, I would typically just set at a 0.1 millimeter on the press threshold and a 0.1 millimeter on the release. And with this keyboard, if I was going forward, I feel like all the time in my gameplay, I would just randomly stop running. So if you barely wobble the key or anything like that, I did feel like the 0.1 millimeter on both of these was just a little bit too sensitive for me. And another thing that I also did notice is with the overall performance, when I was using the 0.1 millimeters in my test results, I was showing that this 0.1 millimeter did have a little bit higher of latency. And I felt like the optimal setting that I got personally out of this keyboard was when I was using a little bit higher of a press threshold. So I did personally prefer to go with the 0.4 millimeter. I did talk to Endgame Gear about this, and they did even recently put out this low latency mode on here. So when you do choose the low latency mode, it does allow you to just make adjustments in the 0.4 millimeter. But again, this is about the optimal settings that I found that I was able to use for my gameplay. When it comes to the performance of the KB65HE, one thing that I see many different outlets doing is they build this solenoid rig. I decided to go ahead and do it myself. That way I can do various types of testing to see how this keyboard actually performs. These tests were performed. I'm using a 4090, a 360 hertz monitor, and I did also drop all my settings on Overwatch to try and get a highest consistent frame per second average as possible. It was kind of hovering around the 600 frames per second range. As I was running these tests on the compression of the Switch, most of the time the Endgame Gear did win. And again, I'm not sure necessarily if that has so much to do with these springs on here being a little bit lighter, or if it actually has something to do with the actual input of the board itself. So I do feel like the only true way to get an accurate readout is if we were to do some type of an electronic instrumentation as far as the terms of latency goes. So hopefully they will come out with something like that in the future. But for the meantime, just playing around with this and having a little bit of fun. The consistent result that I found when placing these two together, when it came to the actual release on the Switch, this is where the Wooting would usually win and pull ahead. It could completely alter the result if I were to actually use the Wooting Lecker 45s in the keyboard, which are a bit lighter. But surprisingly enough, there were a couple of times where both these keyboards actually pretty much nearly tied when it came to the overall performance on both the compression of the Switch and the decompression of the Switch. So I really do feel like that overall the performance of these with the 1000 hertz pulling rate do pretty much fall right in line with one another. All right guys, so that about wraps things up on the KB65HE Hall Effect gaming keyboard. I do kind of feel like these Hall Effect gaming keyboards are really in the infancy of their prime. You have a bunch of great, incredible options coming out. There already is a really big space for the keyboard enthusiast market, but for the HE keyboard, I really do feel like the current state of keyboards, people care more about the premium feeling, how the typing experience is. A lot of people are obsessed over the actual sound of the keyboard themselves. But when it does come to the actual gaming experience, I really do see a lot of potential and a whole different side of an enthusiast market out there where people are potentially going to be going for stiffer springs, kind of finding out what has the quickest, not only compression, but the decompression as well. That could be specifically useful or perfected for each type of game you play, whether or not you have a build for Valorant, CSGO, something for a more movement-driven game like Apex, and different varying factors like that. But in the case of the KB65HE, I really do feel like all around that this is incredibly a solid option. It comes in at an incredibly low price for the great build that you are getting. And if you are somebody that does like to play at a higher actuation point, like a 1 millimeter actuation, they don't currently have a continuous rapid trigger function for this keyboard out there. I did talk to Endgame Gear, and it is possibly something that they'll be able to release in the future and something they are looking into. So really in its current state, that's really one of the only downsides that I do see with this. The fact that I kind of just got my Wooting and I just set it at a 0.1 millimeter on the activation and a 0.1 millimeter on the deactivation, and I just left it and let it sit there. If you are someone that likes to play similarly like that, you're just looking for the fastest response possible, I do recommend sticking with that high speed mode with the 0.4 millimeter activation and the 0.4 millimeter deactivation activation. So for me, playing games like Call of Duty, Apex Legends, I really did feel like this was a great option. I didn't really notice too much of a difference. The wooting is obviously a little bit more mature, has a little bit more of the fine tuning settings. So if that's something you do prefer, or perhaps maybe you play something where you do rely on the release of the trigger just a little bit more like Valorant or CSGO, then potentially that could be the better option for you. But as I'd mentioned, that could be changing here in the near future. So all around, I really feel like for Endgame Gear's first keyboard that this feels incredible, and for me, it's a win. Alright guys, so if you have any questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed watching this video and are interested in more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.